like it's like the Havertz thing. I find so baffling, right? Because we spent 65 million on him. Cool. Like, I feel like we can't ignore that there was a real financial outlay on the guy, unfortunately, and that will be used against Kai Havertz. Not his fault, but it just will be. And again, I'm looking at Arteta and I'm going, but I don't get it. Like, I don't get how you saw Jesus leading the line the way he did all of last season when he was available last season. Bringing everyone into play. And like we all understood that he was getting the better of our wingers to the point where actually when Trossard went up top, we suddenly saw our wingers started to look a lot more productive again. So we knew that Eddie and the way he led the line was a bit of a problem in that sense for our fluidity. And then you see what Granit Xhaka did in terms of yes, he got forward, yes, he was a box to box, yes, he made his late runs in the box, but he was also always dropping in to ensure that you couldn't play through us. And yeah, we got open and we became a bit of a mess towards the end of last season. But I'd say the first half of the season, we're pretty decent in that sense. And now you've got Kai Havertz, who isn't doing anything better going forward and certainly isn't doing anything better defensively. Though I agree he also works hard. I do think he gets stuck in. He's just quite flimsy with it. And he wins
Mm,
headers. I actually think his aerials are like the best thing he's done. I'm becoming more and more convinced he's just a striker, quite frankly. Like enough technical ability to
yeah.
bring people into play and he wins his headers. And it's like another blind spot. It reminds me a lot of Wenger. Like there were players, and I will go to war with Arsenal fans over some of these players that,
Mm,
for some reason, they defend, and then I look at the players they criticize now. I'm like, really? But like, Bakary
yeah.
Sagna was a bad player for a few years before he was brilliant. He was
Oh man,
brilliant for
don't
a long
talk about
time.
my Sanya, man. I'll
I'm
fight
sorry.
you
I'm
over
sorry.
Sanya.
I know. I'm sorry. But like, he like lost it defensively. He was always quite good.
Yeah.
But that like overlapping, bombarding fullback was gone like years before we eventually let him go to Man City, and then City signed him. So that tells you something, I guess. Um, Aaron Ramsey's inconsistency, like Per Mertesacker was slow, Theo Walcott was clumsy. Like there were so many players that I think had things that made Arsenal fans keep believing in them. But ultimately, I was like, guys, they've lost it, and they lost it ages ago. Like, and Arteta's got that sense where like, how many times have we heard this thing about Arsenal? Oh, they're two players away from competing. How can you spend 200 plus million and it still feels like we're two players away from competing? Um,
Yeah.
and even then, I'm not sure I fully believe we are. I just think like with every 11 that's gone out, there's always been one player you've looked at and gone, I don't get this. I don't get past here right back. Is Vieira or Havertz the answer? By the way, I'm a big Vieira fan. Eddie Lee in the line, and it just feels like there's that like, ugh,
Well,
come on.
wasn't it kind of odd? Like, I think I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of like, okay, did we just totally ignore what was like the obvious thing to do over the summer to improve us? Like, I think Rice and Timber are home runs. I don't care.
Yeah,
Like, as far as I'm concerned, they were perfect. And I'm totally
agree.
like, Timber could have played like 5 seconds, and I was like, perfect. He's it. But, you know,
Agreed.
we kind of needed maybe another midfielder. One, like, not even kind of. We needed another midfielder because Xhaka left. And Xhaka is
Hmm.
such a big, like, he's like a load bearing wall for us. He's basically holding the house up, doing all these different jobs. And he's also a leadership figure in a
Hmm.
team that lacks leadership and experience. Like, you had to bring somebody in for that. And then maybe the other obvious choice was to bring in an attacker, maybe even a striker. And we went
Hmm.
out there and spent 65, almost 70 million on a player that's neither. He's not really
Mm.
the kind of striker that makes a difference in terms of like, we already have a false nine and we have one of the better ones that you could have in world football in Gabriel Jesus. And then, like, he's not really a midfielder. We're trying to make him into one. Is it just the case that, like, no matter, it's like not, again, it's not Kai's fault, but we just kind of maybe missed the mark there in terms of what actually would have taken us to the next level. Because I think you could have just bought one of those and missed out on the other and probably gotten better.
I
But
know.
we did neither. And
I
we
think you're,
look the same, if not a little worse this season.
I think you're spot on. I think you're actually spot on. We could have got. You're right. That could have gone on a backup striker, or it could have gone on a proper midfielder. Let me. In the aftermath of a bad result, it's very easy to tear apart every bad decision the club and
Yeah.
Arteta's made. But I think that's because that's where flaws kind of rear its head. And, it's only right. You don't want to be winning games and then focusing on the negatives. But Kai Havertz represents like a bigger problem, in my opinion, in Arteta's midfield talent ID. And actually, what's crazy is I think Partey's a top player, but he's had injury problems. Okay, maybe you couldn't have foreseen that. And Declan Rice, I agree, is a home run. If you look at every other midfield signing, okay, Erdegaard, sorry. So there's 3 in there. But like Lokonga, Havertz, he's trying to turn Smith Rowe into a midfielder. Vieira, who I think will come good, but it's taken a while. It's like a lot of money has been spent on these positions. I mean, between Lokonga, Vieira, Havertz, you're looking at about 110 million. And none of those 3 are definitely looking like the answer. I think Vieira's the closest. I think Vieira, even in yesterday's derby, came off a half time. I thought he looked okay, actually. His ball retention was fine. He just wasn't really creating much. But I thought he kind of did okay. You know, it's quite extraordinary. He hasn't really addressed that midfield, the supporting cast to Erdegaard and Partey, well now Rice, properly. And this was a problem even when we had Xhaka. Because when we had Xhaka, it was about get someone who can compete, who can be different, who can, you know, and really should have had him ready for when Xhaka left to take the reins. So something about that particular area of the pitch, Arteta hasn't
Why
got
can't you
right.
find
And
a
he's
left
actually
center mid?
like it. And is it that difficult? Like because I was calling for James Maddison.
Oh, it was
I was
hard watching him yesterday. It was
it
because it
was
was just
it
like,
was
was that not it? Or did we, even like Soboslai or Alexis
Tonali,
McAllister.
right?
You could have got Tonali. You could have gotten Nunez, who was just sitting around at Wolves. You could have gotten Paquetá. Like, I'm looking at all these players out there that could have cost just as much, if not a little bit less, that just feel like an
Guimaraes a year
obvious
ago.
thing to do. We just did like the craziest thing in the world, like, or convince Jacka to stay. Like, what?
Right. And all these players are significantly more balanced in their attributes and their
Mhm.
kind of range of midfield attributes, right? Like, when you mentioned Paqueta there, like, it doesn't take more than 5 minutes. I know he had a slow start at West Ham, but it doesn't take more than 5 minutes to go, yeah, this he's a central midfielder. Like, and the fact that we're still asking the questions when it comes to Havertz, like, you're so spot on. Nunez was another. Everyone, go play Football Manager because that game knows a player. And like the amount of times I was going, apparently this Nunez guy at Sporting's quite good. Palhinha apparently also is quite good. And lo and behold, they go to Fulham and they go to Wolves and now Man City and they're brilliant. Like, and it just like the Havertz thing, like Arteta, he could look an absolute genius after all this. Like, I'll be on my hands and knees apologising if Havertz proves the midfielder that we need. But if he doesn't, then you're starting to enter a realm of like arrogance with Mikel, where you go, you really had a shocker here. And like there was plenty to tell you that this wasn't the right move. And there were plenty of other deals you could and should have done and didn't. And we know you were linked to these players. Like like we know that through talking to people, whatever, that Paqueta was on the agenda a year ago. That Maddison was a player that they wanted at some point. That Guimaraes was a real target. So to come away with none of these players, but Havertz is the one for about 25, 30 million more than all these other costs. It's like, yeah, you got to get this right. Are you what do you think Kai's best position is? I'm really struggling. I think he's a striker, I'll be honest.
I think he's the player that plays off of the striker.
Yeah,
Not really the guy, but the guy playing off of the striker. So you could put him in the 10 position, but he's more of a Dele Alli than anything. Like, I
I
think
agree.
he's somebody you want arriving, you want, somebody else to hold up the ball. Like, if he had Kane in front of him and he's sitting in the 10 position and we just played with double pivot, he'd probably be all right.
Mm,
But the way that we play, it just feels like the wrong fit for him to be at center forward because that player is quite busy and very
that's true.
involved. And look at the way Jesus plays it perfectly. Um,
Mm.
it just works. But the left center mid, it's looking like not a fit. Like
No,
it
not
really
at all.
doesn't. And yeah, so that and I was saying this like when I was doing like my instant reaction that even though I don't think it was a Kai game in terms of like he's the reason why we didn't win the game, that debate is gonna forever rage on because it's just there in our face all the time that it's
Hmm.
just like he's out there and we're not seeing enough to I think really buy into it at this stage, and it just feels like we may have made a mistake, and then all of your rivals and all that are keep telling you that it's a mistake. So it's going to continuously rage on even though I don't think that it was necessarily up to him.